At 76, Ric Flair just called Vince McMahon his hero during the biggest wrestling scandal ever. Ric Flair is 76 years old now. He's seen it all in wrestling. He's worked for everyone and fought with everyone. But when people ask him about Vince McMahon, something changes in his voice. For years, fans wondered what the Nature Boy really thought about the WWE boss. Now at 76, Flair finally told the truth, and it shocked everyone. While other wrestlers stay quiet or talk bad about McMahon, Flair said something nobody expected. He called McMahon his hero. Not his friend, not his boss, his hero. This happened right when McMahon was facing his biggest scandals ever. When everyone else was running away, Ric Flair stood up and defended him. But why would wrestling's biggest star risk everything to defend Vince McMahon? What did McMahon do for Flair that nobody else knows about? The story goes back over 30 years, and it's full of secrets, loyalty, and respect that most people never see. This isn't about wrestling moves or championship belts. This is about two men who built something special over decades. And now, at 76, Ric Flair wants everyone to know the real story about Vince McMahon. In 1991, Ric Flair was the WCW World Champion. He was at the top of his game, making lots of money and loved by millions of fans. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. WCW boss Jim Herd wanted to change everything about Flair. He wanted him to cut his hair, wear an earring, and become a gladiator character. Flair hated the idea. The real problem started over $25,000. In the old wrestling system, every world champion had to put up a $25,000 deposit. This money was like insurance. If the champion left with the belt, the company kept the money. Flair had paid this deposit years earlier when he first became champion. When Flair's contract was up for renewal, he asked for his $25,000 back. It was his money, and he deserved to get it returned. But Jim Herd said no. He refused to give Flair his own money back. This wasn't about the amount. Flair made much more than that. It was about respect. Flair felt insulted. He had carried WCW on his back for years. He was their biggest star and most reliable performer. And this was how they treated him? By keeping his own money and demanding he change everything that made him special? Flair was angry. He picked up the phone and called Vince McMahon. "I'll come as the champion if you want me to," Flair told McMahon. That phone call changed everything. Flair sent the WCW Championship belt to WWE, and Bobby Heenan showed it on TV the next week. Wrestling fans couldn't believe it. The WCW champion had just joined WWE and brought the belt with him. It was one of the most shocking moments in wrestling history. WCW lost their biggest star and their championship in one day. All because they wouldn't give Flair back his own, $25,000. When Flair arrived at WWE headquarters in 1991, he was desperate. He needed a job and had burned bridges with his old company. Vince McMahon could have taken advantage of him. He could have offered low money or bad working conditions. Instead, McMahon did something that surprised Flair. You know what Vince said? Flair remembered years later. He said, "I'm not going to give you a guarantee. I'll shake your hand to make you more money." That handshake meant everything to Flair. No contracts, no lawyers, no complicated paperwork. Just two men making a deal based on trust and respect. McMahon kept his promise immediately. He planned a dream match between Flair and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 8. When that fell through because of backstage politics, McMahon didn't punish Flair. Instead, he created an even bigger opportunity. The 1992 Royal Rumble for the WWE Championship. Flair entered that Royal Rumble as the third wrestler and lasted over an hour. He eliminated multiple opponents and won his first WWE Championship. McMahon had kept his word about making Flair more money, and he did it in spectacular fashion. The respect was obvious in every interaction. When Flair needed time off for personal problems, McMahon said yes. When creative decisions needed to be made, McMahon asked for Flair's opinion instead of just telling him what to do. It was a partnership built on mutual respect. Even when things went wrong, McMahon handled them professionally. During a 1992 match between Flair and Randy Savage, McMahon got frustrated with too much interference and actually stopped the match in the middle. He called both wrestlers backstage to fix the problem. He didn't like all the interference. It was 2 against 1. He was furious about it, Flair remembered. But instead of blaming Flair for the mess, McMahon worked with him to make it better. That showed Flair what kind of boss McMahon really was. Someone who cared enough to personally make sure every match was good. By 1993, WWE was planning to move Flair down from main event status to a supporting role. At the same time, WCW was offering him big money to come back home. Flair had to make a tough choice. He had a verbal agreement with McMahon that if WWE wasn't going to use him as a main event star and he got a better offer somewhere else, he could leave. McMahon honored that agreement completely. I opted to leave WWF when I was going to be moved to a mid-card position, and Bill Watts offered me to come back to WCW, Flair explained. There were no legal fights, no attempts to keep him against his will, no punishment for wanting to leave. McMahon let Flair finish his scheduled shows and even participate in WWE's European tour before leaving. He could have made Flair's exit difficult or canceled his remaining dates, but he chose professionalism over revenge. This graceful departure told Flair everything he needed to know about McMahon's character. Even when losing a valuable performer, McMahon treated people with dignity and kept his promises. It was a lesson that Flair would remember for decades. During his second run with WCW, Flair often thought about the difference between the two companies. WCW had more money and gave him creative control, but the respect and professionalism weren't the same. McMahon's handshake still meant more than any written contract. When WCW began struggling in the late 1990s, Flair sometimes wondered what might have been different if he'd stayed with McMahon. The competition between WWE and WCW was fierce, but Flair and McMahon maintained their friendship through it all. There were no public insults or bitter comments from either side. When McMahon bought WCW in 2001, he acquired everything: the video library, the wrestlers, and the rights to use their characters and storylines. But there was one prize that meant more to him than all the others: the chance to bring Ric Flair back home. Flair's return to WWE in November 2001 wasn't just another wrestler coming back. McMahon created a storyline that made Flair co-owner of WWE, having bought Shane and Stephanie McMahon's stock. Suddenly, the Nature Boy was Vince McMahon's equal, partner on screen. This wasn't some small comeback or nostalgic appearance. McMahon positioned Flair as a main event player immediately, giving him storylines with The Undertaker, Triple H, and eventually McMahon himself. At 52 years old, Flair was being treated like the legend he was. The on-screen rivalry between Flair and McMahon became very personal, leading to their street fight at the 2002 Royal Rumble. But behind the scenes, their relationship remained respectful and professional. They were two performers creating exciting television, not real enemies. McMahon trusted Flair with major storylines throughout the 2000s. Even during Flair's darkest personal moments, McMahon stood by him. When financial problems became public, McMahon never used that to offer cheaper contracts. When family tragedies happened, McMahon provided support without expecting anything back. "Everything Vince McMahon has ever said to me my entire life has come true," Flair revealed years later. He said, "I'm going to put you back on top," and he did. McMahon had restored Flair's confidence and reminded him why he loved professional wrestling. The partnership worked because both men understood their roles. McMahon provided the platform and creative direction, while Flair delivered the performances and star power. Neither man tried to overshadow the other or take credit for shared successes. On March 31, 2008, Ric Flair delivered his farewell speech on Monday Night Raw following his retirement match against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 24. The entire wrestling world came out to honor the Nature Boy that night. Triple H organized a parade of current and former wrestlers to pay their respects. Shawn Michaels, members of the Four Horsemen, Ricky Steamboat, Harley Race, Chris Jericho, and The Undertaker all broke character to thank Flair for his contributions to wrestling. Then, as the emotional ceremony reached its peak, one final person emerged from backstage. Vince McMahon walked slowly to the ring, commanding immediate respect from everyone present. What happened next revealed everything about their relationship. McMahon simply stood in the background, allowing Flair to enjoy the moment with his peers and the fans. The most powerful man in wrestling chose to be a supporting player in someone else's moment. That gesture spoke louder than any words could have. McMahon understood that this night belonged to Flair, and his role was to add importance to the event without stealing attention. The visual was striking: good guys and bad guys standing together, breaking character to honor a legend. Later that year, when Flair briefly came out of retirement to confront Chris Jericho, McMahon supported his decision without questioning it. Even in retirement, Flair's instincts about what was best for business remained sharp. The ceremony represented the peak of their professional relationship, but it wasn't the end of their personal friendship. McMahon continued checking on Flair during his TNA years, offering advice and support even when Flair was working for a rival company. By 2022, Vince McMahon's world was falling apart. Sexual misconduct allegations, hush money payments, and internal investigations dominated wrestling headlines. The Wall Street Journal published damaging reports, and WWE's board of directors launched a formal investigation into his behavior. Former employees began sharing stories about toxic workplace conditions, and media figures who had once praised McMahon suddenly focused only on his alleged failures. For most wrestling legends, this was the perfect time to distance themselves from McMahon. Speaking positively about him could damage their own reputations and career prospects. The safe move was to stay silent or offer carefully worded statements that avoided taking sides. McMahon retired from WWE in July 2022, ending a 50-year career that had transformed professional wrestling into a global entertainment empire. Even his return as executive chairman in January 2023 to oversee the company's sale only made the controversy worse. Current WWE wrestlers couldn't speak freely without risking their jobs. Former employees often had legitimate complaints that colored their perspectives. Industry journalists felt free to publish critical stories they'd previously held back. But Ric Flair occupied a unique position. At 76, with his legacy secure and no need for future WWE employment, he could speak honestly without worrying about professional consequences. When the topic came up during interviews, most wrestling figures changed the subject. They understood that any statement about McMahon could be taken the wrong way, potentially damaging their own reputations. Flair took the opposite approach entirely. Instead of staying diplomatically silent, he doubled down on his loyalty in the most public way possible. During his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, one of the world's biggest podcasts, Flair knew that every word would be analyzed and debated. He could have easily avoided the topic or given some generic response about separating personal relationships from professional concerns. Instead, he chose to defend McMahon with the same passion that had made him wrestling's greatest talker. In April 2023, during his appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast with millions of listeners worldwide, when the conversation turned to Vince McMahon's controversies, Ric Flair had a choice: play it safe or speak from the heart. He chose his heart. "He's my hero," Flair declared without hesitation. Those 3 words cut through months of speculation about how wrestling legends viewed McMahon. While others whispered privately or stayed diplomatically silent, Flair made his position crystal clear, but he wasn't finished. "I judge people by how they treat me, and he has treated me like I've never had anyone treat me with more respect ever in this business. He's a great guy. I don't care what he does. He's my hero." The impact was immediate. Social media exploded with reactions, and wrestling news sites scrambled to analyze every word. Here was wrestling's most outspoken legend offering unwavering support for the industry's most controversial figure. Flair wasn't dismissing the allegations or making light of serious accusations. He was speaking specifically about his personal relationship with McMahon and the treatment he'd received over 4 decades. Wrestling observers noted that Flair's comments carried special weight because of his own controversial past. The nature. Boy had faced his share of criticism and scandal throughout his career, giving him perspective about judging people during their lowest moments. The timing made his declaration even more significant. Speaking positively about McMahon during peak controversy required genuine conviction. Flair had nothing to gain and potentially much to lose by defending him so boldly. The reaction was swift and divided. Supporters praised his loyalty and authenticity, while critics questioned his judgment and timing. The wrestling community found itself split about separating personal relationships from public allegations. But for Flair, the decision was simple. McMahon had earned his loyalty through consistent respect and fair treatment over decades. No amount of public pressure or social media criticism would change that fundamental truth. At 76, Flair's defense of McMahon represents more than just one legend supporting another during controversy. It reveals fundamental truths about loyalty, character, and the complexity of human relationships that go far beyond professional wrestling. Flair possessed the ultimate freedom when he made his statement. He could speak his truth without worrying about career consequences or social media backlash. His legacy was secure, his financial future stable, and his reputation established. When he called McMahon his hero, those words carried the weight of complete authenticity. The statement challenged simple narratives about McMahon's character and business relationships. While serious allegations deserve attention and investigation, Flair's testimony provided important context about McMahon's treatment of veteran talent throughout his career. Their relationship demonstrates how consistent respect and fair dealing create loyalty that survives public controversy and industry pressure. McMahon's treatment of Flair during both successful and difficult periods built trust that went beyond temporary scandals. For the wrestling industry, Flair's example showed that meaningful relationships shouldn't be abandoned during difficult times, especially when based on decades of positive interactions and mutual respect. True loyalty is rare and valuable in any business. The moment also revealed something important about Flair's character. His willingness to speak boldly when others stayed silent reflected the same courage that had made him wrestling's most compelling personality for 5 decades. Wrestling fans gained insight into a side of McMahon that wasn't visible through television, programming, or corporate decisions. While fans knew the on-screen Mr. McMahon character, Flair experienced the private individual who had treated him with consistent respect and professionalism. Looking forward, Flair's loyalty will likely be remembered as one of the defining moments of McMahon's controversial period. While others distanced themselves or stayed silent, wrestling's most authentic voice spoke clearly about his personal experiences and relationship. The legacy extends beyond just Flair and McMahon to broader questions about friendship, loyalty, and moral complexity in professional relationships. Wrestling provided the stage, but the themes resonate universally.